In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. I want to say a few words about the saint of the day, Saint Gelasius. And it's nice that we have an opportunity to talk about the Gospels of the regular days. Here we are on a Saturday, so that we can focus a little bit more on the saints of the day too, because that's why we're having this liturgy in the first place. The liturgy on every other day of the week is prayed and revolves around the saint of the day. The readings revolve around the saint, as we've heard and talked about many times already. But today's story is peculiar because it's different. It's something different. Usually we hear about a martyr, or even if we hear about one of the monks, we hear about a good, positive life, but we don't hear usually specific stories. And what's interesting about this specific story is that it's not the only time that something like this happened. This story happened a couple of times to different people that I know of off the top of my head. I don't know if it's because the stories got confused or because it actually happened twice. But here we have a saint that was educated, and during a time where not everybody was educated, a saint that could read and write, during a time that people could not read and write. So his service to his fellow monks, and what's amazing about this too, is that can you imagine that during this time there was no Bible for the other monks to read? They worshipped in the middle of the desert, and they worshipped God. They stood in front of God and they worshipped. But they didn't have what we have. We have literally the Bible at our fingertips. But back then, they didn't even have the Bible. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago was the feast of Saint Anthony. And we hear that Saint Anthony, in all his glory, the first time that he had heard those words is when he stepped into church and heard the words from the gospel. If you want to be perfect, sell all you have, give to the poor, and come and follow me. That was the first time that he had heard it. He didn't have it at home to read it. Back then, people would read the Gospels or hear the Gospels when they came to church. That's why we read it slowly and we read it with some sort of harmony so that the person can listen to it and hear it. Anyway, St. Gelasius had this gift of being able to read and write and transcribe. So his service, what he did for the other monks, was that he re-transcribed the Bible for them, for the other monks. And the other monks were so happy to be able to read from the good book, the book that we take for granted, the book that's sitting on our shelf, or the book that's sitting on our table, our coffee table, or the app that's hidden in the back of our thing. St. Gelasius gave that for the monks so that they could read it. And they all did, and they all read it, and they all were very happy with it. This was obviously a very difficult task, as you can probably imagine. We, of course, would struggle if someone told us, why don't you read the Bible from the beginning to the end? It would probably take us a very long time. Can you imagine then writing out every single word of the Bible? It was a very big task that he did for the rest of the monks. So this was something that must have been, taban, very important to him, something that he cherished, and something that the monks cherished. It was something that they didn't have. If someone sent you a copy of the Bible app, you'd be like, thanks, but that was easy. You take it, you download it, and you say send, and you send it to your friend, and that's it. But this was different. This was someone that spent time, hours, days, perhaps even years, to transcribe this book for the benefit of the other monks in the monastery. And what happened is one day someone got a bad idea and came and stole it from this saint, St. Gelasius. So he took the book from St. Gelasius, and then he decided that he was going to sell it. Back then, as you can imagine, this was not just one of the many Bibles running around. The Bible now is the most transcribed book in the world, and it's been translated in every single language that you can imagine. But back then, this was something very valuable, something that people wanted. So he tried to sell it to someone, and this person, bless his heart of course, thought, who should I show this to confirm the value of this book? Who is the person that would know the value of this book? So he had heard about Taban St. Gelasius, and he heard that this was a learned, educated man, a righteous man. So he went not knowing, Taban, that this was the book that he had spent years to write for the rest of the monks. So he took it to the monk, St. Gelasius, and he said, what do you think I should pay for this book? And Taban, he knows the handiwork of his hands. Can you imagine the feeling? Can you imagine the feeling? Like one time, I remember someone took my jacket. I was here at church and someone took my jacket. And I had left it, I think, on a chair. And then next week, of course, the person wore the jacket because it was a nice jacket. He wore it and he brought it. And he was wearing the jacket, and my first thought wasn't like, oh, good, he's warm. My first thought was, I want that. Give me that back. That's mine. And I didn't buy the jacket. My mom got me the jacket. I didn't really care about the jacket. I had a lot of other jackets. But when someone sees something that's his, he wants it back. He can't let it go. It's not so easy. And I didn't do anything for this jacket. Now, can you imagine St. Gelasius? He has a chance to have this book that he spent so much time on, the book that was bringing so much grace to the rest of his monks, sitting there in front of his eyes. And the man says, what do you think? He's going to sell it for me for 16 denarii. And he says, actually, it's cheap. Go ahead. It's very hard. It's very hard. And what's nice about us stopping Kida and going through the story very quickly is that we can see the depth of the importance of what's happening here. We don't just read it as like another common story. We can imagine. Imagine this saint has the opportunity to say, go buy it for me. This is my book. He has all the right to say, I'll take this, you go on your way, and we'll never talk about this again. He could have also said, why don't you go and buy it for me and give it to the church so that we can read it? He didn't say any of those things. He said, it's actually a good cheap price, take it for yourself. So of course, as another twist to the story, the man goes back to the person that's selling him the book and he says, actually, I talked to St. Gelasius. And he said, uh-oh, you did? And he said, yeah, I talked to St. Gelasius. And so the person, of course, is scared because he stole it from him. And he says, so what did he say? He said, it's too expensive. Can you imagine this man? And for him, I can imagine that it was one of those things. We all barter. When we go to the store, I remember, again, a very weird thought. I went to China, and they told us, when you're in China, they're going to give you a price that's very, very expensive, and you have to like bring it down. So like even if we wanted to buy like a necklace, we had to sit there for 45 minutes going back and forth. Everybody knows what the price is, but we have to barter. So this man is doing his duty to get the best deal possible. So he's bartering. He says a lie, but who cares? It's whatever. It's part of the bartering process, something that everybody does all the time. But again, you can imagine, and why this was written this way, is sometimes we take these things for granted. We take these opportunities to do good for granted because we feel like maybe the person, nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention, nobody knows what we're doing, where we're going. Everything we do it in darkness, and we think nobody's watching or nobody's paying attention. So anyway, of course, this man that had stolen the book from the saint is embarrassed, Taban, because he sees that St. Gelasius didn't say anything. He could have done a lot of good things. He could have done a lot of terrible things. So he goes and he takes the book and he says, I'm not going to sell it anymore. And he goes and he takes it back to the saint and says, look, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. And the saint says, it's okay, keep it. Again, what an amazing response to something. Now, maybe we can go as far to say, in this situation, you see an opportunity to take back what's yours and you say, no, keep it. Now, you have an opportunity where someone's literally asking you to take it back and you still say, no, keep it. How can you keep going to this level and level and level, this next level of grace to say, this is not mine anyway? And eventually, the man convinces the St. Gelasius to please take the book, and after crying in many tears, he takes it, and the saint takes the gospel that he had written back and puts it back in its place, and the monks enjoy the reading of it. Now, this story explains to us the gospel, this gospel that we've talked about 3 or 4 times now in the past couple of years or so, that becomes very difficult for us. It's very difficult to understand. So what is the explanation? What's the explanation here? The explanation is giving away something that's not really yours. Giving away something that's not really yours. So we have this opportunity so often. So often we have this opportunity where we're stuck to something on this earth that isn't going to stay with us forever. If you can imagine, what really, truly is yours, the only thing that really, there is really nothing that's truly yours. Everything is going to stay here. This phone is mine. If something happens to me and I pass away, the phone's not going to come with me. As much as I love to be on this phone, as much as I'm the only one in the world that knows the password to this phone, the phone's not going to go with me. There's nothing that I can do with this phone in the afterlife, in heaven. There's nothing that I need it for. However, on earth, I'm so attached to it. I'm so stuck to it. Why? Why is that the case? And why can't we unstuck ourselves from these things? If I was wise, if I was a wise person, if someone asked me for my phone, I would say, of course, it's yours. If you want it, you can have it. That's what a wise person would do. But that's also, for us and in our society and the way that we think now, that's what a crazy person would do. No one would just give up their phone just after being asked. But think about this for a second. We have opportunities to practice this life of giving, this life of realization that nothing that is in front of us is really ours. This book that St. Gelasius wrote, this holy gospel that he did for his friends, his brothers and brethren, the monks, he spent so much time on it and he did so much work on it. And when the time came for the question to be asked, is this yours? He was able to say, no, it's not mine. It's not mine, you take it. When asked, is this worth the money that I'm paying for it? He said, yes, it's actually worth even more than that, but you take it. What a great lesson for us. Maybe one day we can stop being attached to this worldly stuff, to stop being attached to our clothes and to the TV, and especially to our phone. I would urge you, all of us, for a couple of hours a day, to let the phone go. Put the phone away. Spend time with one another. Give yourselves a chance to let things go and reignite the passion and love of the family again. I know that it becomes very hard and we just kind of go on in the world and we just do what everyone else is doing. But give yourself this opportunity. You as parents have the chance now to teach a valuable lesson to your children and to yourselves. Give yourselves the chance to separate yourselves from the things that keep us stuck to this world. Because one day, the world is going to pass away, and everything is going to be gone, and you'll have none of these things. The only thing that you'll have is the deeds that you did on earth, and the good deeds, so that you can stand before Christ and say, I did these things, I did them for you. Remember that as you walk through this path of life. And remember this story, and remember the depth of beauty of this man being able to give up something that was so close to himself. And start to do this for your friends, for your relatives, for your brothers, for your fathers, for your sisters, for your mothers. Give up something that's yours so that God could give you and fill it with something else. And glory be to God forever.